And you're live.
All right, thank you, and welcome everyone to our June meeting for the Annapolis Environmental Commission. I'm Jeremy Hansen, and I'm the chair. I'll just go ahead and dive right in. We'll start with a roll, and Jackie, I'll save you for last so you can introduce our newest face to the group. I'll just go in order of starting with myself. I'll go in order of who I see on the screen. So I'm Jeremy Hansen. I'm chair and with resident of Ward 5. Linda, I see you next.
Hi there, Linda Matthew. I am in Ward 5.
Kathy.
Good evening, Kathy Welker, Ward 5.
Alicia.
Alicia Roberson, Ward 7.
Bill.
Good evening, Bill O'Leary, Ward 2.
And Marianne.
Good evening.
Marianne, you cut out a little bit for me, but maybe that was just me.
Yeah, Marianne Marbury, Ward 1, hopefully.
Thank you. All right, and Alderman Savage.
Yes, so Alderman Savage for Ward 7, Chair of the Environmental Matters Committee.
And Brian Adams.
Brian Adams, not any ward in the city, and urban forester.
Right, and Jackie.
Jackie Gile, Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability.
You want to introduce our new face?
Yes. So our new newest employee in the city of Annapolis and your new staff liaison to this commission is Dylan Lakonich, and he is he just started on Wednesday. So I'll let Dylan introduce himself and where he has been recently working and his background a little bit for you guys.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. That's right. I am the new environmental programs coordinator. Happy to be of service to you guys and help out the sustainability team. Really excited to get these projects done. I was recently with the city of Salisbury as their sustainability specialist, and it's actually where I went to school, Salisbury University. But I grew up in this area, so it's a real privilege to be able to work on these projects with you guys. Thank you.
So Dylan is going to be with us he's going to hop off, but he'll kind of be listening with one ear a little bit because he's taking, you tell him what class you're taking, which you're tonight.
Right now I am in the middle of a landscape architecture course, but it shouldn't be an issue in the future.
Yeah. So I kind of dropped this on him on the first day of work that this commission was meeting tonight. So, and if he was available, so at least he can kind of be hearing you guys in the background while he's in his class too tonight. So I will be with you for the rest of the meeting.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and welcome, Dylan.
Thank you.
And I see Jenny, you've joined.
Hi, yeah, Jenny Janice, Ward 6.
And our vice chair. So I think with that, we can get underway. Let me double check my notes. So I don't think we have meeting minutes from the last couple meetings. I think first we'll get caught up with that maybe next month. But I did want to mention the draft public water access plan. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about this later tonight, as far as if we want to talk at the next month or bring Eric Lashinsky back at all. But the draft public water access plan is out and available for comments. There are two public events, one tonight from 6 to 8 p.m. and the other July 9th, also from 6 to 8 p.m., both at Pitt Moyer Recreation Center. Sounds like one of our commission members is there tonight, but I encourage anyone else who's here tonight instead to go there on July 9th. I hope to be there myself, but it depends on the children. So, and was there a deadline for those comments, Jackie?
Yes, it's August 30th. So if anyone attends on July 9th, that's before your next meeting, and you guys can decide if you want to submit written comments via the portal, or otherwise, and get them in before August 30th. And there's, so if you, I sent you the link, I sent you the notice today, late in the day, for the, the notice that had for the public meetings. I also, in that email, sent you the link to take you direct to the draft plan. And also there's besides the draft plan, there's also something that shows you exactly where the little pin drops are that show where the exact public access points are, and some other information in there. So all the comments that will be submitted, it's kind of a blog style of comments. You'll be able to see everyone's comments. Once they're in on August 30th, Planning and Zoning will respond to comments, and they'll take them all in and respond to comments, and then hold additional public meetings. So this final plan will not be finalized. You figure August, they got to take in they probably won't hold more public meetings probably till, I'm thinking, October. And so this plan will be finalized probably by the end of the year, sometime November-ish.
Okay, good to know. Thanks for that
Yeah.
timeline. And I'd certainly encourage any commission members to submit individual comments as well, but I think we should submit joint comments together before August 30th.
Yeah.
So you can let that percolate. If any of you are particularly interested, maybe volunteer to take a point on those comments. If anyone is especially interested, then we might be more efficient at getting them in. All right, and let's see. Yeah, that was the one update I wanted to cover since we've introduced Dylan, the public water access plan, and the bulk of our meeting today is somewhat a follow-up from last month. So it was noted, we did get the email from Alderman Savage last month before our meeting, and included a list of various amendments. So I think we wanted to hear how those fared, but we also wanted to hear how the urban forester budget and a number of other things fared in the city's budget. And I think also then pivot into talking about future direction, how we want to work to achieve the city's tree canopy goals, and sort of that forward-looking discussion. So with that, I'm not sure if Alderman or Brian, either of you want to go first. I don't really have a preference.
Yeah, I think I'll kick it off, Brian, if you don't mind, just to highlight some of the budget items. So what I emailed you last time were about 4 things that I was working to get into the budget as amendments, and they did all pass. I'm happy to report. The first one had to do with transitioning our stormwater fee, which we call our watershed restoration fund, to a more equitable and hopefully more, hopefully a model that will bring in more funds ultimately. But it's shifting to the equivalent residential unit model, and that's the type of stormwater fee that's used by the county and a number of other jurisdictions. So what that means is that it's based on your actual impervious surface. And so we have kind of a hybrid system where for residential users, it's based on your typical, it's based on tiers right now for, I guess, residential and commercial. Residential are grouped in together, if I'm remembering this correctly. And it jumps up based on impervious surface for the commercial properties. However, the tiers don't really, we have some properties that have an incredible amount of impervious surface. For example, the shopping centers like Safeway, Giant, Growls, and those really are not being adequately assessed a fee. We're not really getting enough from them that we need to, given their impacts. And so what this does again is allow us to base it on their actual impervious surface. So how it works with the county is they have a standard equivalent residential unit, which off the top of my head, I think it's somewhere around, maybe Jackie knows, but I think it's somewhere around 2,000 square feet, 1,000 or 2,000 square feet. And so multifamily homes would be less than that. So I think they're like 0.5 of an ERU. And then, so every jump you get up in a pervious surface, you could have properties that are multiple ERUs or multiple units of that 1,000 or 2,000. And so yeah, that really, I think, helps us. So in order to do that, though, we need to get funds to make that full transition, because they have to update some of the mapping capability in the city. And I think they were looking to get a contractor to hire that, to contract that out to get that done. And again, ultimately, I think that'll allow us to get more money from these larger properties. So that was for $25,000, which is what I was told Public Works needed to get this transition completed. The other amendment I got passed for the environment is related, and that links our best management practices, our BMP catalog database with the Watershed Restoration Fund database. And what that does is, and that was for $15,000. Again, what Public Works told me they needed. But what that would allow us to do is to go to these large properties like the shopping centers and actually say, look, if you don't have a stormwater best management practice, stormwater BMP in our database on your property, then we're going to charge you more money, because those properties that have zero treatment are sending more pollution into our waterways. And we need to start getting to a point. My idea is to get them to a point where we're actually charging them maybe double their, I don't know what it's going to be, but for example, double their ERU charge, their stormwater charge, so that they're paying more into the system to make up for that. And we could either use that as kind of an incentive and just keep escalating that fee if they don't want to work with us or don't want to put something in. I know staff has some comments. They want to make it a bit more of a pure incentive as opposed to a punitive measure. But I tend to like, actually, I think we need to make sure that they're actually paying more than what they're paying something that's equivalent to what they're polluting, what they're contributing. So that passed. And the third thing, well, I guess before I move on to that, are there any questions about the stormwater fee?
And I see Jackie has a hand up, and I'm not sure if that's old or left over. All right. Yeah, any questions?
I had that up because I want to make sure he doesn't forget about the new position. He was so good to get me. So don't forget that, Rob.
Oh yeah, that's the next item. So are there any other questions on the watershed fund?
I have a question. Do you know how the county is tracking the impervious surface currently on the, you said the county has it. I'm just curious. Are we trying to put in the same system that the county uses, or a different one? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know exactly how our staff is going to do it, but I mean, the county they use GIS mapping to determine the amount of impervious surface. And so presumably we'll do something very similar, but I think so yeah, that's a good question. And I think as this moves along, you might want to ask Sean Wampler with our GIS group, or if you have Betsy McEwen, who's heading up our stormwater group, she may be a good one to ask about some of those questions.
Okay, thanks.
And Bill?
All right.
Hey, Alderman, I have a BMP in my backyard. So was it specifically for commercial property owners? Or is it for private property owners as well? This potential to increase stormwater fees.
Yeah, no, well, I hadn't really thought about it too much, but that's a good point in that, yeah, we can use this on private, your typical residential. And, we're not going to use this to increase. I'm not I don't think it's really worth increasing the fee on residential unless unless they have a significant amount of impervious surface. But typical homeowner, this is not going to make a difference. But what we could use it for is to say, if you have a B&P in our catalog, we'll give you that credit, because we do currently have a credit system in our stormwater fee. I don't think it's really utilized too much. But this would allow us to. So yeah, I definitely, and I don't think the council would have any interest in making it punitive for homeowners. Again, unless it's some huge house that has like a, I don't know, well, a huge parking lot or tennis courts that they need to be mitigating for.
No tennis courts on my. Thank you.
All right, and what was the or Kathy, go ahead.
Oh, well, so I was just wondering about apartment complexes, condos, townhouses that do have parking lots, how those are considered.
Yeah, those I think will need to be, I think we'll need to give that some more thought, but those also are kind of on my list, so to speak, because a number of those apartment complexes, and I used to live in one, the Spa Cove Apartments, have a zero stormwater management. And so I think we do need to work with them to make sure they either put in those facilities, give them approval to take out, for example, some parking facilities, parking lot, or elsewhere, work with the city to give us easements. Even if we perhaps put it in ourselves in partnership with them. There are a number of ways to do it, but I do think we need to be more deliberate with apartments and condos, because we don't want the property owners to simply pass on those fees to the residents. So, I think this will, I mean, I'd be willing to guess that we're kind of maybe some of the first jurisdiction to really look at doing this. So we'll have to give that more thought for sure.
I know that Betsy McCown is prioritizing some of those areas for restoration projects that were predated our stormwater, law, to do restoration projects there. And also when we encourage those communities to apply for restoration projects through the trust fund money that we give to the Chesapeake Bay Trust. And some of them have. So we need to do some more outreach, I think, to those communities to initiate some of those projects on their own.
Yeah, and that could be something we do as we phase this in to say, look, we're going to be increasing your fees significantly over the next, I don't know, or within 5 years, unless you have some kind of improvement planned, some kind of B&P planned on your property that you're working with the city or somebody else on addressing. Because we need to do something to get those properties in compliance. I mean, we've had this fee now for probably about 15 years, and we're not seeing a super amount of progress being initiated by those property owners.
Alicia?
I just wanted to add that I think it'll be very important for the city to work with those townhouse communities and apartments, because I know that some of those communities have been applying for the CBT funding for watershed assessments and facilities and aren't getting them. I know my community specifically and a couple other communities around here. So I think it's going to be a more difficult problem to solve, but it's important for that to be worked out. So I know that they want to implement them, but hasn't been as easy as we'd like.
Yeah, I think we need to do some education about how to apply, like what makes a good project. And
well, even just getting past the first step of like the watershed assessment, because a watershed assessment can be very expensive for the planning portion.
We are unlike the county, the city does fund watershed assessments now. We started doing that in the last year. Something we can talk to the trust more about how to help communities to get past that. Maybe we should talk about that more, about what you run into and what you ran into in your community. And did you talk to Betsy McCown at all about that?
So I met with the CBT and I submitted an entire proposal this last round, and I'm still waiting for feedback on why my community wasn't selected I think it's likely
Okay.
to do with the fact that the nonprofit HOA didn't partner with another nonprofit. But my background is 8 years of stormwater construction. And I'm familiar with engineering firms. So and they were very supportive of doing the watershed assessment to move into design and engineering and construction in later years for projects on our site. So
Which community were you?
Mariners Landing.
Mariners Landing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just making a note on that one. I was not barely involved with this one this year. I was a little understaffed this year. So hopefully get Dylan involved more this next go around. But yeah, I'm making a note about that one to talk to Betsy and the trust about it.
I mean, they said that there's another round in the fall. So it might be that there's like another grant that they think would be better suited for something like the watershed assessment. It's just definitely more outreach and more assistance, I think, on that is needed.
The other thing I mentioned to Betsy, and we never fully discussed this, was whether we've been funding this, I guess this is the 4th year at $300,000, and whether that's sufficient. You know, now that this is becoming better known and there are more applicants and more projects, which we like. I mean, that's good. Whether we should be funding this at a higher level now, and if there's enough money. So then we get to the second question, Rob. Is there enough money in the Watershed Restoration Fund for us to fund more projects out of the Watershed Restoration Fund?
Yeah, that's a good question. We need to get that. Well, that's a good question for Betsy.
Yes.
We need to get a handle of, and I guess when it comes time for Stantec to put together their fee analysis, they'll need to make sure they look at telling them we want to increase our CBT allocation by X percentage. But Alicia, are you saying that you did not get feedback from the Chesapeake Bay Trust?
Not yet. They've offered it. I just haven't heard feedback yet, but
okay, yeah,
they just notified us like this month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The awards just went out. Yeah. So
okay.
They just learned.
But I will say like $300 or $300,000 is not a lot of funding for a lot of projects, if that's what Annapolis wants to do.
Especially when we fund, like every once in a while we'll do a $150,000 award, then that doesn't leave a lot for others.
I estimated a couple of those projects, and yeah, they were expensive.
So how is,
especially if we funded one like in a previous year for assessment or design, and we want to do construction, which is more expensive, then there's not a lot left. But what we've been trying to do is we do design, we're trying to push applicants over to DNR for the shovel ready projects.
So Alicia, how do you receive your stormwater fee? Do you get does each homeowner get a water bill?
Yes.
Or is that, okay.
Yep.
So you each
pay for
individually
it
pay
water
the
bill.
fee. Okay. And so you're saying, okay. Does anybody in the community have stormwater management that they've installed, like a rain garden, anything like that?
No, our community was built before all of that, and a lot of homeowners in the area just aren't familiar with what tools need to be put in place. And yes.
So I guess the question would be like for Jackie, if the community like this, I guess Cedar Ridge did this, they installed some BMPs on their property, but I don't know how that's factored into the stormwater fee as far as the rebate. Does that go to the entire community? Does it go to just the nearby property owners?
You asking me?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah.
Jenny,
That's a Betsy question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in as things get, clearly there's a lot of details that still need to get worked out. And so what I'm hearing just made me think about if there are new fees and that then there's also this like grant process where there's what sounds like a prioritization based on a watershed assessment. it should be really clear what the priorities and how that watershed assessment is ranked, because if you can't get past, like if for some reason, your community isn't whatever those rankings aren't meeting that assessment, and you do a ton of work and a lot of this is volunteer. Sure, Alicia didn't get paid to do that. Just having the less of it, I don't know how opaque it is now because I haven't gone through it, but as the details get worked out, it would probably be helpful for these apartment complexes and whoever else is going to need to apply for this stuff to understand what those rankings are and how they might sit in what their chances are of getting that money.
Yeah, that's provided in the application so this Chesapeake Bay Trust, they administer this grant money just like they do for the county. They did it for the county first, and the city joined in. And I've been on the review process on the county's end because that's my day job. But so they have an entire list of criteria. They're pretty transparent with how they rate the projects. But I don't know exactly the role of the watershed assessment. I don't recall seeing that with the applications.
So the watershed assessment is like a different option. You can apply for just funding for the watershed assessment in the city. And then another option is to apply for, once you've done that, you do design and construction, maintenance. So they have different options.
Can you skip the watershed assessment, or you have to go through
No,
that?
I applied for funding for the watershed assessment so that we then could go into design and construction in the following years.
Right.
You don't have to. No, you don't have to go through watershed assessment first.
Okay, you can
It's not required.
apply for.
Yeah, you don't have to, but then you just have to get funding in another way for the watershed assessment from the engineering firm to come up with the preliminary designs. So you could do
Gotcha.
that through a different grant.
Okay,
Or
gotcha.
pay for it yourself.
Yeah, you just basically need to know how to direct your water and how much water you're directing.
And keep in mind that the Public Works has some watershed assessment work underway, and that your community may be in those areas where they are conducting watershed assessments. So some of that's one of the reasons why, when you decide to do a project, you contact Public Works or the trust and you do your site visit, they can tell you that we've already done assessment here, or we're in the process, or we're going to do that. So it's a step you can skip.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Which, yeah, the city does come to the site visit during the CBT grant application. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they're doing the whole Back Creek watershed. They're assessing all of that.
Sounds like we might want to just bring Betsy to a future meeting if she's available, and maybe dig into this a little bit more and see maybe in the future what might be a reasonable direction or recommendation to the council as to future amounts to consider, or is it just dependent on what's available through the fund, or does the council have to set the amount that's sent to the trust?
Well, I mean, the council ultimately votes on the final proposal, not necessarily the breakdown. So that's going to be staff determining, Betsy determining, and Jackie, how that's going to be split exactly.
We just came up with, we just decided, when we decided to participate, we said there's $300,000. We're going to try $300,000, and we've never increased that amount.
Okay.
So I kind of threw that out to Betsy last year. I was like, well, should we be increasing this amount? And I think we were kind of in the midst of this whole process of whether we should be increasing the watershed restoration fee in the first place.
Right.
Betsy didn't get into it, I think she's waiting to see the outcome of that.
And since the funding to do that analysis went through, is that like a year-long analysis, like a few months? When is Public Works going to get that analysis?
I don't know. All that stuff just passed, so the details are not ironed out. These really just enable staff to move down these tracks, to implement, but we just don't know the details. Jackie, I'm sure we'll have an idea here shortly in the next few.
I can find out from Betsy. Try to get some answers from Betsy. She probably doesn't have a schedule just yet, since this Rob said this just all passed. But I can try to get some answers from her and just let her know that we have questions around that.
That's fair. All right. So I think there was one more budget thing to
Yeah,
cover,
two
the new
other
position,
things.
but I do want to move on the trees soon. So let's,
Well, the next one's related to the trees. Actually, no. Well, the next one I'm going to just quick out of the way. I did get funding for $5,000 for reusable bags, and this is for distribution of those bags to lower income residents. This is related because I'm anticipating that we'll pass some form of the plastic bag ban in the city that the county did. I ran into some roadblocks at the last Environmental Matters Committee meeting. And so I've got to work on that with my colleagues. But
I've got those ironed out for you now. I took care of that today.
Good. I was away at a conference, so I'm behind on my emails. But
yeah.
So hopefully we'll have something very similar to what the county has introduced, and we can start moving forward with distributing these bags. The other thing, and that meeting is going to be later in July. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but the last item on the budget I guess I do have two other ones, but one of the big ones related to trees I wanted to highlight is and also related to the watershed fund. So, and I guess I'll just jump into. Well, actually, I'm sorry, going back and forth here. I'm trying to think of the best order of operations. Before I get into that, I'm going to jump in with my other item that's not related to trees, and that is the funding that we have in the budget related to mobility, sustainable mobility. So I did also succeed with getting an amendment to change the name of our traffic engineer to be a sustainable mobility engineer. And the intention, and we also supported funding for a pedestrian cyclist planner position that's going to be in our Department of Transportation. And so we have record funding for the city in this budget to improve our cycling network. We are looking, I got money in there to look at converting, to put Bay Ridge Road on a road diet from Arundel in the Bay up to Hillsmere Drive. And that would mean reducing the lanes, looking to put in some traffic circles, and also putting in, did I say bike lanes along those? And so we also have funding to put in a bike lane on Bay Ridge Avenue leading into the city. We have allocated funding for Tyler Avenue to potentially put that on a road diet, putting on bike lanes on that. Also converting the traffic signals to traffic circles. It's not guaranteed at this point. We're still doing a number of studies, I think, on the Tyler Avenue, but we wanted to make sure that was going to be looked at because it is a priority of ours to make a shift towards more cycling because we want to get people out of their automobiles, which means less emissions and just cleaner air in general for the city. So that is a large priority of ours. I also got money to look at converting some of our intersections in residential neighborhoods that may be 2 or 4-way stop signs, converting them into mini roundabouts. Again, because those are much safer for pedestrians and cyclists. So we continue to move forward with that initiative. So leading into my last one, well, I guess first of all, any questions about that, the cycling component?
well, I do recall there was an event last night related to, was it pedestrian or was it cycling related planning? I forget the name of the event, but it was sponsored by the city. Does anyone know? Maybe I'm confusing events. Never mind.
Yeah, you could be right. I don't know.
I just want to say that
Jeremy,
sounds
you're
amazing.
probably right. There's so many things.
I just want to say that sounds amazing. Changing the transportation engineer's name to sustainable transportation engineer. I love that. often thought that that would be a great way of trying to get a different perspective. So that's good to hear. And it's encouraging to hear that there might be a new position for alternative mobility engineers. Is that what you said? So that's really encouraging.
Yeah, we're really excited. Our trip to the Netherlands really inspired us and to move in that direction because it was incredible. Just how that really changes your entire community. More people want to be outside. It's quieter. Doesn't smell as much from exhaust, and and not to mention, the road diet, just shrinking down the lane sizes makes it safer, makes the cars move slower, and we got to figure out ways to continue to get people out of their cars.
There's one more position you forgot.
Yeah, so it's just Jackie's eager for me to get to this. The next one is the budget item is the dedicated funding source for our urban forestry program. And I hope I don't steal any of your thunder, Brian, but as we've mentioned before, just to reiterate, because I'm seeing some new faces, we've had a tree canopy goal in the city for probably, I don't know, 25 years or so. But our goal was to get to 50% tree canopy coverage by 2035. So we're now 10 years away, just about. And we've realized we made a mistake. It was good. It was great to adopt that goal. But, it doesn't mean much unless you actually fund it. So we're at a point when I went to Brian saying, Brian, what do we need? I want to make sure, because the tree maintenance, the tree planting fund always gets cut year after year. And so I've been able to get money for it this year, partly because I think we've gotten a large influx of public testimony. So community support have just been making it very clear this is a priority for Annapolitans. And so, but yeah, so the program's been cut. And so I went to Brian and said, what do we need to actually meet this tree canopy? Let's figure it out. Like, what do we need year for year to do planting wise? And what he told me is that, well, we can't actually, there's no way we can physically, biologically meet our goal as far as the trees. Even if we plant all the trees we need to next year, they just can't grow fast enough in 10 years to be able to meet this tree canopy coverage goal. And so we have to change the date, the goal date. And so I'll get into that, I think, with the next section, but just for the sake of this part, just to say, I did get approval to increase the stormwater fee to cover, and I think it's by about 17%, which is it's about I think it's about a $4 increase per quarter. So instead of paying $24, people will be paying $28 per quarter, a typical user. And so it's not a huge amount of money, but it definitely adds up. And so that's as much. Brian gave me a spreadsheet, which I think he may get into, as far as how much money he needs to do the plantings, to get additional staff, because you need staff to help with various aspects of this, which again, I think Brian can touch on. And so since we moved the funding out of the general fund and into this watershed fund, it freed up some money in the general fund. So that's what I used. I wanted to keep that in the environmental field, so to speak. And so that is what went towards Jackie's office to help pay for an additional staff person to help with our general environmental programs, including trees, but also I think the general program. So she's going to be looking at some point to create some kind of well, I'll let you talk to that, Jackie, if you want. As far as your plans, I don't know how much you want to say now or not.
I forgot what we settled with the title we settled on, Rob. Was it environmental associate or environmental specialist, something like that?
I think for now it was like environmental program manager, and then the one below, I think.
No, we were going to change Dylan's positions to like environmental program manager, but So the position that Rob so wonderfully created late in the budget process was this entry-level position, which we've been needing for a long time, and that would support both me and Dylan's position. And this person would be, I had most of you know, I had a fellow for about 6 months, and which was very helpful and performed entry-level kind of functions. He supported me almost like a legislative intern, which produced much more in-depth staff reports with legislative research. He helped me research grants and helped write portions of the grants. He helped with our certifications, our Bird City Sustainable Maryland certifications. He did like last minute research on whatever I needed, helped with special events, tabling events. He was going to help me more with the website, but we never got around to that. He was identifying who we should reach out to make notices for the gas powered leaf blower ban now that it's passed. So he was doing a lot of entry level type of work. And today I was actually working on a job description for that so they can get that position classified and really create it into a real position so that I can advertise it. So that's the position that I'll be advertising for in the very near future as soon as it can be classified. And that will be someone who's pretty much, fresh out of school, maybe with a year of experience through fellowships or internships.
Yes. So the benefit to doing all of this is, I think really, adding the staff person in Jackie's office is really going to help move some of these programs forward. And as far as the tree part of it, it's really huge in my mind, because it is the first time we'll have a dedicated funding source. And what that means is it's not as easy for the council to cut. The general fund is easy for us to move money around, but this fund is dedicated, set up. People are being charged a fee specifically for this. And so we can't just move that fee to a different fund. It has to stay within, in this case, the watershed fund. Because obviously, trees have the direct benefit of improving our water quality, which is why I think it's entirely appropriate to put in this. And this is something we laid the groundwork for a couple of years back by improving the definition of the watershed restoration fund in the code. And this is just kind of the culmination of that effort. So I do want to, before we get into, regardless of what goal we end up choosing for the new tree canopy goal, and before we get into that, the important point is that this Monday, the program is escalate. So the first year is really a staging, which I think, Brian, if you want to, the first year is staging, and then we're going to ramp up the program once we have the staff to address all the planting. So, Brian, do you want to get into some of the details as far as that initial year's cost and what that's going to?
And Linda has a hand up, so before we pass it on to Brian, Linda, your question?
Just real quick, I got that we're not going to meet our goal by planting new trees, but the other option is saving our existing trees so we're not losing any more of the canopy. And is there a way, like Mary Ann and I are both involved with Save Our Trees. We've been out there, tearing down all the invasive ivy and other stuff in the city. And what I'd like to do, and what we've done, like in my community in Hunt Meadow, is involve the communities, give them some incentive, some information, and people there that just let them know that this stuff is killing our tree canopy, and get people out. And now is not the time to do that. The time to do that is, fall through the winter when it's cold. And so as a community activist or something like that, that I think would be another way to go.
Yeah, Linda, and we agree, and we will actually talk to that point, because that was a part of this initiative. So Brian, you want to talk a bit about some where the money's going?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, to that point, obviously, preserving our existing canopy is our primary goal, and we do that through various means, whether it's ordinance or groups like yours helping, or the maintenance program that the city has, which has always again been underfunded, and that looks like it's changing based on these numbers, and that is included in my costs. Is maintenance of our existing trees, primarily for the city, that's street trees and park trees. But those costs are included, and they do go up from year to year. But to break down when we talked about this goal, so Eric Lashinsky and I talking about the comp plan, realizing that this goal was really not feasible, presented either reducing the goal to 45% or extending the time. So I've proposed this 2050 date to the Environmental Matters Committee. I think we presented to the Environmental Commission on this maybe last year. But we've got a little bit more concrete information now about the numbers. So as Rob alluded to, he asked me, what is it? How much money do we need? Because this, as I said, this program has always been underfunded. We've never really had a planting budget. We've gotten by with maintenance costs, but we've never been able to plant trees. And when you look at our city and our current canopy, which, by the way, we're getting a new assessment very soon, but the numbers we're working off right now are from 2017. But essentially, we need to cover like 364 more acres with trees to meet the 50% goal. So while we can preserve all we've got, we will not meet our canopy goal without additionally planting a lot of trees. Now, these numbers that I put together for planting, they're by far nowhere near exact. They're very high level. They're very much based on estimates. There's a lot of factors that are not considered and that could change. Growth of the existing canopy, for instance, is not accounted for in this, which is going to help us. But then this also assumes no loss of canopy, which is not a realistic target. We are going to lose canopy. Whether we lose it and regain it in the long run is what we try to do with the laws we have. But there will be loss of canopy. So when you get into the numbers, essentially I took, looking at estimated or average canopy spread for canopy trees per acre, came up with a number for how many trees we would need to meet the 364 acres, I think I said, which is 16,380 trees. And that's at a 30-year canopy growth. So as Rob said, we biologically don't have the time at this point to meet a 2036 goal.
And Brian, I'm not sure if you thought you were sharing. I think we have seen the spreadsheet, but if you wanted to screen share, that's what you're referring to.
No, I thought you guys had it.
I think we do have it. I'm just mentioning in case you wanted to screen share.
I could.
I pulled it up, but
I can pull it up. Yeah, give me 1 second. I had it on a different computer, but I can pull it up.
I have it handy if you want me to.
While he's doing that, let me just add that when Brian and Eric first started talking about moving the target, I was really reticent to do that because I don't like just kicking the can down the road and moving the goalpost unless we actually had some kind of solid plan, actual plan as far as funding and how we're going to get to that new goal. Because I don't know, again, if we just move it down the road, that doesn't mean we're going to get to it. So I think this is good as far as Brian has run the numbers, as you'll see. He's put in a lot of work on that. And these numbers, I think, will be dug into by Stantec. Stantec is the one who analyzes our watershed restoration fund, the stormwater fee every year to determine if we need to increase it or not. And so my thinking is that they will probably be also digging into some of these tree planting and canopy numbers in the future, but that's something I guess, Jackie, you'll have to work with Betsy on.
we saw the spreadsheet for a second, but now we're seeing your inbox.
Okay. Sorry. Chrome tab. There we go.
And to Linda's point,
see it?
Yes, you see it now.
Yes.
Just
Okay.
quick, if I could mention to Linda's point, some of this funding, as you'll see, I think we're going to look to potentially support nonprofits as a partner.
Yep.
And Alicia, did you have a question before we go back to the spreadsheet?
Yeah, I had a real quick question. Is there enough acreage, the 350 acres that you're saying we need? Does that exist for tree planting in the city of Annapolis?
So that is another factor that I'm not considering here. That's acreage that is identified in analysis as plantable. But when you get on the ground and you start looking at that, no, not realistically, because you've got easements, you've got utilities,
Yep.
Landowner preferences. A lot of this is private property. I'd say 80%, 90% of this is private property. That's our other huge, another huge hurdle for us is identifying or actually acquiring that planting space, because the city property is about full. We've got some spaces in Truxton Park and some of the street end parks, but as a whole, the city property is essentially where it's going to be. Between rec and parks wanting to preserve some open space for recreation, our public works department doesn't want plantings in certain easements and stormwater easements. So no, a lot of this is dependent on the private property owners.
Yeah, and I think it's just important to highlight that for everyone, that that's what you're working with. And just real quick question, you're assuming $300 per tree? Is that like a 2-inch caliper?
It's a low number, but it is what I used here. I mean, it really depends.
No, I think it's a good number. I was just asking if you had a size idea.
Oh, size. Well, we plant like 1.5. We try to go with 15-gallon trees because ball and burlap becomes so difficult to manage. So we go with somewhat, not huge trees, but significant enough that people don't run them over.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And that's the planting. That's the tree and planting, right, Brian?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll see that in later years that cost goes up, because I foresee us planting all the open areas and then needing to start converting impervious to planting boxes and Silvacell installation. So our planting costs are going to rise significantly, and I haven't fully accounted for that in this spreadsheet. Baltimore City is planting a lot of trees on urban streets right now, and their planting costs are around $800 a tree, because they've got to have Public Works open up the sidewalk. They've got to put new soil in, decompact the soil. So this is go ahead.
No, Brian, yeah, just to jump in on the planting stuff, because I do think this is, as you maybe were going to say, like, needs to be a really comprehensive approach on the city's end, similar to the cycling, but it's all connected, because I think it's easy to quantify, okay, look at the aerial GIS analysis as far as available areas to plant. However, you also have to factor in our other stormwater initiatives and cycling initiatives, in the sense that, what we saw in the Netherlands, as you shrink the road down, a lot of our roads are between 10, 13 feet wide, even 15, yet they only need to be, the lanes, 9 feet wide. That's from Johns Hopkins. When you narrow the road widths, lane widths, you have room to put in bike lanes, but also room to put in trees. That's a part of the road diet idea, is you put trees close to the cars, because it helps slow them down. It makes it feel more like a rural road as opposed to a runway. It's hard to quantify that until we get moving with some of the street tree plantings in the roads, how much that's going to be. But I think we can add acreage that way. We also have an initiative where we're looking at reducing the parking requirements. And so if we can reduce the parking requirements for these grocery stores, we can go and say, similar to what we wouldn't want to do with stormwater, say, look, we want to take out a parking spot here and there and put a tree in the middle of the parking lot. And that will, I think, contribute. But that's, again, hard to quantify, because we haven't really gotten that moving. We don't know how that's going to work as far as easements and survivability, but these are the kind of things that I think kind of thinking outside the box that we need to get. If we want to meet this goal, we need to get creative. We need to work with the school district, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. This needs to be, all of city departments need to be on board with this. All residents, and Alderwoman Finlayson had a really good point at the last Environmental Matters Committee, and that was, to really have a robust PR campaign about this, to get the community on board, because there's a lot of residents out there like yourselves who take the time and participating on a board like this. You recognize the benefits of trees, but there's a lot of residents that are uneducated and about trees, and we need to be able to reach out to them and explain why we want them, why they are important to the city overall, and get people to want to allow us to plant trees on their properties. But we've also got internal issues to work through, like I said, with utilities and easements, and there's some things to get through with other departments that we have our share of challenges. But I think as Alderman Savage alluded to, if we think outside the box, there's a lot of really cool things that we can do if we've got the funding and the willpower to do it. So I don't know if you guys want to go over this spreadsheet. It's pretty self-explanatory. I think it basically, I tried to sort of spread the planting out over time. The big thing is that, we really need to hire additional staff. I am the only person overseeing all of this, and I'm already overwhelmed. So if we start planting at this level, we're going to need a lot of help. Just organizing these projects, it takes a lot of work. We only plan a couple times a year, but you need most of the year to plan this stuff out. So I'm hoping to develop a job description for something like a planting program coordinator to hire with the city. That would help me with some of what I do currently, but also really focus on the planting efforts. Do you guys have questions about the spreadsheet? Otherwise, we can talk about some things that I'd like to do or that you guys can help with, that sort of thing.
I guess maybe just summarize for us like the difference in the total funding if we're aiming for 2050 versus 2045, 2060.
Yep. So the problem with 2045 is that because we don't have as much time for the trees to grow, that increases the number of trees to be planted, because you don't have that extra time to allow for increased canopy growth. So the total number is higher. It's at 21,500. Again, both years, 2045 and 2050, we need to really do the majority of the planting over the next 6 years to give the trees time to grow. But the numbers of trees to be planted under that scenario get really, really high in 28, 29, and 30. And the costs really go high as well. We're talking over $1 million, over $2 million. When you move to 2050, it spreads it out a little more. You don't get as high. The later years, you still get pretty high amount, but it's going to take that time to sort of ramp up and build up enough capacity to handle that kind of work. But because we've got the extra 5 years of canopy growth, it reduces the total number of trees needing to be planted, 16,380. Our recommendations to the committee, 2050 is really the minimum. We feel that the goal is even really attainable. 2060 would be more financially palatable. It stays under $1 million a year, and you spread out the planting over 16 years as opposed to 6 years, because you've got the extra 10 years worth of canopy growth. But again, as Alderman Savage has said, these goals should be aspirational. We're already moving back a goal by quite a few years. And 50 by 50 does have a certain ring to it. So I think, the department's on board with 2050 if that's where we go.
Yes. So that would be good to get your feedback on. There was some disagreement on the Environmental Matters Committee. because they are, I think there was some concern about the cost because without calculating it out, I would estimate that to meet the 2050 target, we would eventually have to increase the stormwater fee to probably be, so right now, after the latest increases, it's up to, I think, around 20, actually, it's probably around $30 per quarter. We would probably have to increase that to around $50 per quarter, at least total per quarter. So, and that's a jump from your current, last year was 25, 24 up to about 50. So that would end up being almost doubling it over the course of a couple of years. That now, keep in mind, perspective comparison wise, Washington DC's stormwater fee is about, I think, $70 per quarter. So it would still be under the highest in our area. So, and again, if that's something the public thinks is worthwhile, I think you'll need to let us know down the road, not necessarily this budget, because I'm hoping, personally, I think we should go for 2050 because, like Brian said, I think these goals need to be aspirational. I've been in government long enough to know that if the goal is too far out, they're not going to think about it. We need something coming up soon to kind of hold our feet to the fire, to put some urgency behind it, to make sure we do get creative. And 2050 is still, and that's that's also 25 years away. That's still quite a long time in itself. But that's where I think we could certainly use some feedback. And Brian, so the comprehensive plan is going to be coming back to the council in July for a final vote. And I know Brian may know what goal is going to be in that. I don't know exactly what goal is going to be in that. The council will be able to change that if we want. And then in the future years, we'll be using that goal to determine funding fee levels.
I think it was decided that we're going to put 2050 in the comp plan.
Okay, well, good, because that saves me trying to have to change it.
Jenny, I see your hand.
Well, this all sounds great, and I'm really excited to hear about the use of the public right of way and doing streetscape standards but one thing that I've seen, obvious, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new, but just wanted to make the comment about these goals. And I don't know if this doesn't have to necessarily be in the comp plan, but just when you're initiating it later on and getting into the details and really integrating all of the departments and the layers and the multiple objectives that I hear going on. Once, like the 2050 goal is 25 years away, but then having those near term, every 10 year, every 5 year, every 7 year, whatever, based on how you want to do your tree assessments, having some kind of goal that's nearer term to really light the fire. Because when I hear you say like, we want to light the fire, it's like, let's do that in the next 7 years, or something that's relatable to the political terms, and then that can also be linked to the bike goals. So I heard, I'm just going to pick on the Bay Ridge, what you mentioned, because you mentioned it. So say that's potentially something that could happen in the next 10 years, let's say. So how many trees could be planted on that, and then have that be part of that goal? So then in the conversations that are happening, the conversations about trees as BMPs, trees part of the alternative mobility plans, it continues to be part of the conversation in every meeting, at least mentioned. And I find that's kind of that's what I've found in the past, where it always there has to be like the beat of the drum, as you know, right? So it always has to be brought up, and so having those nearer term goals and linked to the multiple projects helps.
I will say one of the nice things, we've contracted with a new vendor to provide our canopy analysis, and the way it's done now, it's going to be available to us every couple of years. So we're not going to have to wait like 5 or 10 years to get an analysis of our canopy. We're going to see it every few years. So we can really monitor our progress much better than we've ever done in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great idea, a great point, Jenny. Yeah, I think with the that assessment that Brian mentioned, that'll help. But also, I think, I hadn't quite thought about it too much, but again, a great point. I think so. Brian and Jackie, I think you two will have to work with, P and Z and Betsy and stuff as far as how, because I don't even know off the top of my head, but how to work in the tree canopy goal is going to be worked in that assessment. Is that assessment going to be worked into the Stantec study of our stormwater fee, which is going to include this tree canopy, or is that going to be done supplemented every few years by the other tree inventory that Brian's talking about? I don't really know. And these are great problems and that we have, right? Since we have a fully funded program, is how do we actually get to that implementation and achievement point?
Mhm.
Bill?
Do you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, you can go ahead. I think we're done with the
Okay.
spreadsheet.
Yeah, actually, if you don't mind, I would like to share my screen real quick. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm just trying to think of in my area, most of the wide open spaces
We'll have to figure it out.
Sorry?
I think that was
See
a
my
mistake.
screen?
Go ahead.
Anyway, most of the wide open areas are actually other public institutions, not necessarily. I know you mentioned, Brian, the city is got limited capacity for additional tree planting, but certainly in my neighborhood and around my area, most of the other wide open spaces are actually either nonprofit, like the stadium,
Mhm.
or they're churches, or it's county schools,
Yep.
or it's state, like the circuit court. I don't know if my sharing is working properly, but this big chunk of land here on Route Boulevard, where the district court is, nobody ever even uses that. That should all be trees, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've looked at that one specifically, and I certainly want to reach out to them about that because it's just sitting there unused.
Yeah, I mean, never gets used. And we've talked to Bill Gibbons with the NAAA on multiple different issues with the stadium, and I think, and they're certainly receptive, and I know they have some plans for improving the environment in the stadium grounds, but there's a ton of opportunity for improvement on the stadium, and that's a big chunk of land. And then, like the school behind my house, they've got big chunks of just grass that I know the students never use. I mean, it literally is unused land. So I guess my point is that, yeah, we absolutely have to reach out to homeowners and fill in all of the city areas as best we can, but we also have to do these public to public, partnerships as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'm meeting with a church off Forest Drive pretty soon because, like you said, churches do tend to have quite a bit of open space. So we are going to be meeting with Heritage Church about planting on their property. But yeah, you make a good point. We need to reach out to some of these larger landowners and try to get them on board with letting us plant on those properties.
Yeah, and as far as the Navy, it brings up a interesting point. I know they may not want to plant on their grassy side because just as far as maybe they may have difficulty establishing grass, but I think it's worth a conversation with them about taking out some of the parking spots in the big paved lots to maybe, for example, they could take out maybe, I don't know, 4 of them and put the tree in the middle and then put some permeable, even grass, and then perhaps permeable parking spots around that. And so I guess one of the questions, I don't know if Jackie knows the answer, but this is an example where we could use our stormwater fee, because I don't know if the Navy, frankly, I don't know if they're paying a stormwater fee. Presumably they would be on this property, But if we can convince them, maybe we could say, look, we'll reduce your fee if you agree to putting in some trees on your parking lot.
Yeah, I know the city already has a partnership with the NAAA as far as the walking path that goes around the stadium. So I feel like there's definitely opportunities for more collaboration with them.
Kathy?
This wouldn't be the hardest problem to solve because this is really interesting, and just the number of challenges is a lot to think through. But I was just wondering how you decide what trees and what mix of trees to plant, because I've heard of these monocultures of trees is not healthy. This mix of trees is that mimics, the ecosystem is important. So how do you determine that, what kind of trees to plant where, in what groupings?
Well, that's really, it comes down to the site. I mean, obviously our goal is to stay native and, push for shade canopy trees as much as possible, get as much bang for our buck. But you're always going to have, and that's another thing that's not really accounted for in my spreadsheet, is you're always going to have a mix of understory and canopy trees on these sites. So you're not going to have quite as much canopy coverage from the dogwoods and redbuds, the understory trees, whereas you're going to get more from the oak trees. But it's going to be site dependent, and where we can do, where we can mimic the forest setting and plant, a large number of trees in a sort of a natural type setting, we'll certainly go for that. But I think it's going to be a lot more of like one here, one there, one on this property, one across, it's going to be, we'll certainly be aiming for diversity, and at this point, I don't know much. I can't say much more than that about it at this point, because you're also going to have to deal with, and I already have this issue with street tree plantings, is property owner preference, right? So you've got the person that lives there who's going to be, presumably trying to help us take care of this tree, and they've always got, they want this tree or they want that tree, and it also comes down to availability, because the local nurseries are they only grow in certain trees, and so some of the stuff that you might want to plant isn't always available. So those are questions that will be answered in time.
And just thinking back to the spreadsheet, I know there's plenty of state and federal dollars available right now as well. So are you factoring that in? Like, are we able to maybe take a chunk out of that from as far as the city budget goes, if we're able to utilize some of those state and federal dollars?
Yeah, so those grants will be supplemental to this. Once we've got our established baseline, and then we should be able to go after, once we've got sort of a planting program in place, capacity, we will be able to get state and federal grants to perform a lot of that stuff. So, and I think, and I've got to work out the details, but I think if we're able to acquire grants to handle some decent sized planting projects, some of that watershed restoration fund money can go back into the stormwater stuff that the fund also pays for. But those are details I don't know how that fund works and how the money's coming to me. I don't have all those details yet.
All the more reason to get you some more staff.
Yep.
Kathy?
So Brian, you'd mentioned about ideas you have and things that we could do. I don't know if we could move to that. I'm very interested to hear more.
Well, so the first thing I want to start doing in the next year is sort of trying to start identifying some of the low-hanging fruit where we can identify open street tree planting areas. The conservation easements, I think there's some opportunities for us to plant there, and I think I'll engage with the Annapolis Conservancy Board to sort of help identify some of those areas where we can plant. But I think as far as, you know, for this board, I think anything you guys can do to help, you know, not only spread the word, but engage citizens who are interested in working with us to either plan projects, have trees planted on their property. We do have Replant Annapolis, and we're hoping to increase that funding this year, and it's been doing really good, but we still need to continue spreading the word. That's a program through the Watershed Stewardship Academy, and they are doing tree plantings on community properties, HOAs, apartment complexes. So that's a really good program that we're going to continue to fund. But really, it's just right now, it's about trying to build capacity, find partners. We really need to identify partners in the community that are willing to help plan these projects and reach out to the community and spread the word, and also, you know, educate the public. But really, it's going to be people that are interested in putting together projects that we can fund. And if you guys have any ideas as far as PR is concerned, that would be good. I do want to put together some sort of a pretty robust PR campaign to really spread the word. So any ideas you guys have about that would be helpful.
Yeah, because I think this is really good, Jan. Jackie, I think you're muted, but I saw your hands moving.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, are you going to put together any sort of PR campaign about not taking down trees, Brian? Because I know that is a huge headache for you anyway, because we get the call, they're taking down a tree in Eastport again, and it's a huge one.
I mean, I think that should be part of it. I think if it's a PR campaign about trees, I think a lot of that is also going to be about what you can and can't do with trees in the city. And hopefully they can come up with clever ways to get that message across. Because if you just start telling people that here's the code section and here's what you're allowed and not allowed to do, it gets kind of dicey, because of the way our code is written. There's very specific parameters on which trees can and which trees cannot be taken down. It's a difficult message to spread through social media.
Yeah, I think we need to come at, I mean, as I know through working in environmental, it's best not to be an environmental nag. It's better to just educate people in a positive way. So doing a campaign around the importance of trees, all the benefits of trees, and the goals of the city. And maybe that's something, you know, we can work on, Brian. Maybe I can find money somewhere. One of these mini grants are flying around about doing some kind of behavior change. You know, maybe there's funding around that, and align that with the city's goals. That would be something we could do. I find that's much more productive.
I absolutely want to start getting to work on this, on a PR campaign very soon, you know, as soon as I can, as soon as the funding's there, you know, or if there's grants that we can go after, either way.
Yeah.
And
because Brian's like, his only tools really are, the tree comes down, it's a fine. And it's like, he either can require them to replant, it's usually 3 trees if it's a big tree, or fine them. The point is the tree is gone, the canopy is gone. And at that point, and some people are like, well, okay, I'll pay for it. You know, no biggie, you know, that they take the tree down. And we usually get the call about Eastport, but what we found when we did we found that we were losing more trees in West Annapolis than we were at Eastport, but we usually get the calls about Eastport.
And it's mostly backyard trees as well, which is
it's backyard trees.
Yeah, and I guess
which you don't need a permit to take down unless it's by the water.
Yeah.
Right. And Kathy, before you go, I just want to also maybe throw out a suggestion as far as people that can help get the trees in the ground, do the planting, come up with PR campaigns. Maybe consider the city can get a climate conservation corps person in later years. I know you have to dedicate, you know, prove you can have the staff available to mentor the young person. But I mean, I've worked with a lot of really great conservation corps people over the years, and I've seen them physically put hundreds of trees in the ground. So I know they're really good at that. Kathy.
Yeah, no, that's funny. I actually pulled up on my other monitor the American Climate Corps. I was just kind of peeking at that. But what I was thinking in terms of like part of a PR, right? Some of the messaging, especially, you know, obviously we don't have anything ready to go right now, but with these heat domes, right, is that we are suffering through, and just noting to people, I mean, I'm so lucky, right? Where my townhouse is, I've got trees around two sides of me, and I can set my air conditioning on 85 and it never gets up to 81 because I've got so much shade, right? And so not only is it cooler, more pleasant, it's helping me in my utility bills too, to have these additional trees. And even in our neighborhood, I can tell the difference when I walk from the townhouses that have lots of trees to the single family area that has fewer trees. It just gets hotter as I go along, right? And that's in the same neighborhood too. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, showing people how it can benefit them, you know.
Yeah, this is actually a great time to be doing this because of the heat and the climate, the way things are going. People will pay attention when you tell them, hey, you know, look how hot it is. And if you had trees, your property could be 15 degrees cooler, you know, when it's sunny. And so it is a good time for messaging to piggyback on that.
Yeah.
And-
It was funny, you guys. I was with a delegation from South Africa last week, and we were walking them around town. And at one point, I think I was walking up Green Street, and the woman I was walking with said, "Can we walk on the other side of the street? This is just way too hot for me," because there were no trees on that side of the street, but there were trees on the other side of the street. She was from South Africa, and she needed to walk in the shade. And
Yeah.
I looked over at the city manager. I was like, "See, we need more trees. These people can't even stand it,
Well,
and they're used to heat."
it's interesting because I just got back from that conference, which was conveniently in Ocean City, but we got back today and our front yard it's brown. We have a large crepe myrtle, and anywhere under the crepe myrtle, it's nice green grass, but outside of that, it's brown from this past weeks of heat. But so I wanted to, in an effort to wrap this up, our part of this anyway, your meeting, I just want to say, you know, the commission is actually authorized and tasked with performing a number of functions related to our tree program. And so I think as far as recommendations, studying, assisting, investigating, conducting meetings related to this program. So, but I think how exactly you want to participate and assist and perform these functions is really going to be up to the commission. But I do, you know, I think I really want to emphasize that we want your feedback. We need your feedback, your recommendations, and your perspectives as residents, everyday residents on this, because it's in many ways, it's not a new program, but it is a kind of in my mind, a new initiative where we really are relaunching, in my view, this program. So it's really going to be an important time for, I think, you to contribute and work with us on this.
Rob, is there anything not locked down with respect to this new position for Brian or funding for Brian?
Just the details as far as position. I don't even think we bothered classifying the position. That's all of those details need to be worked out.
So nothing with funding.
The funding's there. How you use that funding is really entirely up to you, you know, the city.
Okay. Because
Yeah, right.
nothing to advocate for, nothing they could advocate for or support.
Well,
Council.
you could, no, not to council, because we've done our job. We've allocated the funding for a specific purpose, but how that's broken down is something which I think the commission could have feedback on to staff. Because, you know, and I think that's still to be determined, I think. But Brian, I think you provided a rough breakdown of costs, but I think to create an actual program, that's going to have to be, you know, I think ironed out even further, especially when you're talking about creating a new position.
And Rob, that money, when it goes to the Watershed Restoration Fund, you said that's like, it's earmarked for our program. So is there any, when that money comes through July 1st, is there any chance that we it gets taken for stormwater BMPs? How does that work from
Well, that's a Jackie question because
Okay.
I think that internal mechanism will have to get worked out. I mean,
Yeah.
our watershed fund is currently has been split between multiple departments before.
Okay.
The way that's earmarked, so to speak, is through finance. So finance has that money going towards specific pots. And so the
Okay.
easiest thing to do might be just to take that 355,000 and make sure that's earmarked in finance to go directly to planning and
Yep.
zoning.
Yep.
That's probably the easiest way. And then you could allocate it however the department wants.
Okay.
And
So
I
I'm
just
just,
wanted- go ahead,
go
Jack.
ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead.
So I think what Brian and I both are fishing for is there's something here that the commission could, write a letter to the mayor or planning and zoning, advocating for certain uses of that money, like to hire someone to support Brian or whatever they want to
Absolutely.
advocate.
Yeah, for sure.
And on that, I just wanted to say thank you to any of you who, did provide testimony. I know Mary did, to fund our budget, my budget. We had put in, my director had put in a request to increase it, but this is increased further. So I do think that helped. I think hearing from residents was definitely helpful.
And I know we did submit something on behalf of the commission. I think it was pretty last minute, but did get some in there. And personally, I think the 50 by 50 makes sense. I'm personally, I hear the point of the stretch goal and everything else, but I'm also realistic that trees can only grow so fast, and I just want to see us stop losing canopy. I think that's maybe a midpoint goal or whatever you want to call it. Like if we could stop seeing canopy loss by 2030 or 2035, then maybe we can actually achieve that goal by 2050. So would it help to also provide that comment regarding the comprehensive plan, or does it seem like that 50 by 50 is kind of going to happen either way?
I think it would absolutely help. And if that would be, it would need to get done sooner rather than later, because I think we're set to vote on it at our last meeting in July before our August break. So
Right.
Yeah, if you want to recommend that particular goal, I would definitely get that in.
And I
Jack,
do have the
muted.
priorities letter does highlight this, trees in general is a pretty big part of our priorities. And I do have that letter done. And Jackie, I forget if I should send that to Hillary or just send it off to the aldermen and people myself, or what the process should be, but I figured I'd send that to you and Hillary. Oh, you're muted. Nope. Still don't hear you. All right. Oh.
You're talking about your priorities.
Yeah, we have the priorities letter ready to send.
Yeah,
so I'm just noting we have that already, and that will also, I think, reinforce some of this.
But if you wanted to send something regarding the 2050, the 50 by 50, that's something for council to send to council as your recommendation from the commission. You could send that to council, and you could also send it to planning and zoning, the director of planning and zoning. But you guys should vote on whether you want to do that as a group, and then it's a simple letter to send.
Let's see. I'll rephrase that. Getting late in the evening. So I think our priorities already include that goal or version of it.
Oh,
So
50 by 50, okay.
So I think we're just kind of repeating what we've already agreed to.
Okay. All right. So if it's one of your priorities you've already agreed to, then you don't have to vote on it.
Let me check.
But the letter would still be helpful.
Yes, it would. Oh, the letter would be helpful. I'm just saying you don't have to vote on a position that you've already agreed to.
Oh, actually, it looks like, yeah, I'm gonna update our priorities letter because we are referring to the older version of the comprehensive plan of 50% by 2040. So I'll update that and then I'll send it off to you guys.
Okay.
Procrastination paid off. All right. Well, if we don't need to vote on that since we've already agreed to that, were there any final questions for either Alderman or Brian? Bill?
Yeah, I just had one. Is the city planning any additional annexation of additional land? Because that could change the calculus.
Yeah, nothing significant as far as acreage, but yeah. So for example, Cars Beach community, which is in my would be in my ward. It's surrounded by city property, and it's basically 2 streets worth of lots. So that's something, yeah, we'll have to absolutely make sure through the annexation process that we don't lose any tree canopy throughout that process, right? As far as the any subsequent potential development of that. But that is getting annexed largely because I agreed to it, and because a lot of them have failing septic tanks. It's an old community, and that's obviously not good for our water quality. We need to get them hooked up to our sewer, and but that's something I guess stay tuned in that regard, because that's something for sure the commission, there'd be benefit for the commission to speak up about those priorities as far as making sure there are enough trees on that property.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know how that's gonna, but your question, I don't know how that's gonna impact our tree canopy goal initially.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
But that's the only active one right now,
Yeah.
Bill. I know that the mayor talks about Hillsmere and Bay Ridge, but
Right. Well, I'll thank Brian and Alderman Savage for joining us tonight. I think they can enjoy the rest of their evenings. I'm sure we'll be talking to them again in the future.
Thank you
both.
all.
Thank you all for your
Bye.
support.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And I do want us to see if we can wrap up maybe on the early side if possible, but certainly by 9. Jackie, the rest of the agenda is basically for you, but I do also want to spend a little time to see what folks would like to spend time on at our July meeting. You might have some ideas on that, but I also just want to remind everyone, July will be our last meeting until September. We were planning to take August off like the council does. We agreed on that schedule months ago. So just a reminder that we won't be meeting as a commission in August. So we have one meeting between now and our September meeting.
okay. So I just wanted to just recap what I was hearing for as far as action items for this group. That one, a short letter in support of the 50 by 50 for the comp plan to City Council, copying the Director of Public Works on that, is what Alderman Savage said would be very helpful in support, because that's the goal that's being included in the comp plan. It will be voted on in mid-July. The comp plan will, that is, and that's the goal that will be included in there, but City Council could change that. So if they're hearing from the Environmental Commission that Environmental Commission supports that goal, that would be helpful to Alderman Savage saying. So a letter from this commission could be something that you could do to be helpful to that goal. The other action item that this commission could take would be to submit comments. Either you can do that individually and as a commission on the public water access plan, and those comments are due by August 30th. And the next time you can go to a presentation on the public water access plan is July 9th at 6 p.m. at the Pip Moyer Recreation Center. But you can submit your comments online, and the commission can submit the comments by August 30th to the link that I provided you.
Sorry, are those meetings recorded? I'm on vacation that week.
I would think they are. We always record our meetings. I would think they are. You probably can look at that online. I believe it even said that on the flyer I sent you today. I'd be very surprised if they were not. And then what was the third thing you guys talked about? It'll come to me. Oh, and then anything else you want to submit to council or to planning and zoning? Any other comments you want to make about anything else, the way that watershed money that's allocated should be spent? If you want to make a comment on to planning and zoning about that an employee should be hired that we've discussed tonight to implement the program that Mr. Adams discussed, suggestions about a conservation corps, even intern or a hire of an employee, or other suggestions you want to make, such as making sure that some of those funds are dedicated to tree maintenance. This is often in the budget. Sometimes money is put aside for planting, but not maintenance. There's maintenance money for tree trimming, but not for, as Linda brought up, ivy removal and things like that. They mostly just do maintenance of limbs and dead limbs and things like that. And how important it is to find other new areas to plant, such as parks, schools, things like that. That would be another area where you guys could submit a letter to planning and zoning about the use of the watershed restoration fund. Sorry, I'm losing my voice today. So there's just some things as I was taking notes, I was noting where the commission could weigh in on. Let's see. So I don't want to keep you guys, this is already, we're past time, and I'm going to do another update on the resilience and sustainability items. We are moving forward. I just want to mention we are moving forward with, we selected a contractor probably in the next week on the pollinator park for the pollinator habitat creation at the solar park. We put out bids just for the design phase of it to get an idea of what we can plant there, where we can plant, what a design cost would be for the entire park. This is the initial, just the design for the design idea. And then we'll move into the initial, once we select a contractor for the design, we get the design done, the bidding for what it would cost to do the entire park eventually. And then we would move forward. The next phase would be to move forward with planting an initial pollinator habitat at the solar park, and then estimating out what it would cost to plant the entire solar park, both inside the fence and outside the fence. So, and that way we could go to council and tell them what we would need to create more habitat there. So we're probably going to pick a contractor to do the design within the week. And then Dylan is moving forward with updating our greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the city, both for the community greenhouse gas emissions and for the city buildings. Greenhouse gas emissions inventory has not been done since, I think it was done they used 2006 as our baseline, and it was actually performed in 2008. It's woefully outdated. And so we have to even decide what baseline we're using. Fortunately, Dylan, when he was in Salisbury, they did a greenhouse gas inventory. So he's gone through this process before. And so I made that one of his first assignments. And then he's also getting out information about the gas powered leaf blower ban, which goes into effect January 1st. So he's working with our PIO and getting information out about that. And I just wanted to update you guys. Some of you don't know about the fact that the city is one of about 30 jurisdictions that sued the oil and gas industry over the impacts of climate change. And that lawsuit has been chugging very, very slowly through the motions practice in the court systems throughout the United States for the last 2 years. That is pretty much exhausted, and we're finally moving into the discovery phase. And when things move into the discovery phase and the defendants find out that they're not in such great shape, that's when things move into the settlement phase. So we have a discovery conference tomorrow afternoon that I'm part of, and with our counsel, Cher Edling, and we're going to be making some plans. So we, the city has been involved with some of these similar litigation around pharmaceuticals, and we've settled those nicely in the past. So this litigation is kind of like lead paint poisoning and tobacco, litigation, where the industries knew they were causing harm. They denied it publicly. They engaged in marketing to tell the public science is bad. It's not true. It's not true. Don't take any action. Don't change your ways. And then we're left with the bag and the money to deal with the after effects. So that same thing with climate change. So that's the lawsuit that we filed against the oil and gas industry, and it's moving. It's now moving. This is going to gain some momentum and come to a conclusion, we hope, within the next couple of years. So I was very relieved to hear that we're moving into that phase of this litigation. So I'm going to leave it at that for right now, and so you guys can close up your meeting.
All right. And so as far as our July meeting, would people want to hear more, like if maybe Betsy is available, or to dig into the watershed restoration fund a little more, or are there other suggestions or ideas from the group?
I mean, I'm not that familiar with watershed issues and remedies. So like, what are these best practices, right? I'm not going to do the reading on my own too, but just the kind of things that communities are doing, what kind of things the city recommends that communities do would be helpful to hear, as well as more about how the fund works also.
I can talk to Betsy about if she's going to be ready to talk about Stantec's evaluation of the Watershed Restoration Fund.
Yeah, maybe not so much even about that, just like how it works now.
Okay.
I think some details, because I realize I'm not entirely sure how it works right now, as far as everything, all the details and how it gets parsed out and used to support the various projects around the city.
Okay.
So maybe even if it's her or someone from her staff, maybe even just like a 30-minute primer or something, and we don't have to.
Okay, and for the people who are newer to the commission, Betsy McCown is an engineer in the Department of Public Works, and she is the stormwater program projects manager, and the stormwater engineers report to her, and the environmental inspectors in turn report to the engineers. So she's in charge of all the stormwater restoration projects and our MS4 permit and all the reporting that goes along with that. And she also works directly with Chesapeake Bay Trust, as do the stormwater engineers, and deciding which projects get funded through the city directly through the Chesapeake Bay Trust. And she works with Stantec on the stormwater fund and how we set those fees. And it does get complicated. So I can talk to Betsy about July and see if she is around, if she's not on vacation for that.
It is that time of year.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I also think just as a group, we could plan on taking a look at this public water access plan and determine if we want to make any comments or send a letter supporting anything.
Right. Yeah. Well, we can do that in July, whether or not Mr. Lashinsky can join us.
Yeah, and there's the July, I think our meeting's after, well, it's after July 9th, so there will have been that one community event.
Yeah. That's why I suggested, like, maybe if somebody can, you can either listen to it, I think it should be recorded most likely, and or attend, and then, and if you can't, it's online. You can look at it. You don't have to attend the event to look at the documents online. And then the group will have, the commission will meet following that. So you can decide then if you want to submit comments and then how you're going to do that, because then you'll have till the 30th to do that. I think, you know, Mr. Lashinsky has already come before this commission. You probably don't need him again.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that using our 2024 priorities, this is an example of how we could craft a letter that supports what's going to go into that plan, but reinforce the goals that we have as our priorities. So each of those spaces could have trees, be considered green infrastructure, et cetera.
Right.
And we do mention access as well.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, and those are good points, Jenny, because in the plan inventoried, first of all, what we have, and then identified areas as opportunity areas for public water access, and then also considered, you know, equity concerns, and then, you know, and then it identified what was at these points. So going to the goals of the commission, you could make comments on, you know, ways they could improve some of these street ends, such as, you know, it may be a street end park and it has certain amenities, but is there any shade there where the bench is?
Right.
You know, is there room there for street trees? I mean, or tree plantings in general, even understory trees? You know, is there proper stormwater controls there?
Bike racks.
Other things that, you know, other things that go toward that you could incorporate the goals of this commission. So with applying the goals of this commission, that lens to the public water access plans. That's an excellent point that you raise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, it sounds like especially if Betsy is able to join us in July, we can also spend time talking about public water access plan and anything else that comes up between now and then. And maybe now with Dylan on board, maybe resilience and planning, the projects list will once again become a monthly item for us but we'll see. But were there any other final comments or suggestions from the group? All right, if not, okay. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All right, Jenny motions to adjourn, and Linda, your hand was up. Bill and Linda second. All right. I'll just call it. All those in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. And